So I wanted to keep up doing videos, so I'm going to keep doing videos. That's a weird intro. Um, yeah, it's just I've had a thought as I've got an event in Italy on the 22nd, which I'll put a link to if you want to do it, if you're in Europe or I don't know if you want to make it to the US. It's going to be really cool. It's the big sort of Italy events that we see streamed quite a lot, and a bunch of the sort of players from Europe are going to be there. It's going to be awesome. A lot of the German players are going across as well, and Lorcana Villain will be casting it. So yeah, that's great. But of course, it's going to be set five, and I need to sort of pick which deck I want to play. And over the weekend in Seattle, I played Wheel, and that was mainly down to, like I mentioned in my last video, um, I played Wheel in the Friday Constructed, which I think actually are awesome events, but they are very risky to play the deck you want to play, because it could either tank your confidence or make you really, you know, worried about the deck choice, or it can make you really happy if it does really well. Um, so yeah, I was going to play Wheel on the Friday and then play No Wheel in the main event, but the Friday went so well, I was like, I just want to carry this confidence over. But that being said, all said and done, looking at the data and sort of looking at the players who performed well with Blue Steel and looking at the testing, looking at just every bit of data that I've managed to come across, I was very fortunate enough to practice sort of the week prior to Seattle with Sky and Moyen and Alphos all on No Will, and I was again going to play No Will as well. And I got to see just how well it performs, and I think the Cheater really brings the deck all together. Versus red decks, if you have Cheater and Hiram, your card draw never really flutters. It's sort of always good. And versus steel decks, Hiram seems to tend to be enough. But of course, if you can get some Cheater as well in there, that's fine. Cheater's a bit interesting. Once it's in your hand, you kind of have to play it unless you're planning to quill it away. You kind of have to play it and then just run through the steel removal, which I guess takes a card out of their hand that they'd prefer to be using on something else. But maybe not because Chicha is only a 2/1 and she is card draw, so they probably would want to use it on her. But if she can get you one card, then die. That's not that bad either. That's over explaining it. But I think I'm going to title this video. I think No Wheel is the better option out of the two. I think it is probably the best deck for Blue Steel players to play. I think 100% you should be looking at No Will and going into set 6 as well, unless these 20 cards that are hidden from us are just game changing, mechanic changing, which I think they might be because they're being hidden for so long, but they might also just be just interesting cards. I think going in, we tend to have the ability to want to break the meta. There's going to be blue-green decks tried again. I reckon Blurfall's going to try and have a go at it again. There's this location-heavy decks that we've looked at because there's a lot of new location cards, and a lot of them give us things like card draw and stuff like that. Card draw as well, location card draw outside of purple, which is really interesting. But I think overall, when we come back to it, the core cards are going to be the same. Like Ruby Sapphire is still going to be around. Blue Steel's going to be around. Green Steel. If you look at the Green Steel list from set 4 to set 5, all but one card like Anna really is the only difference between that. It's because they just printed really good cards and there was no reason to change it. The tempo of the meta can affect it, but Blue Steel is one of the amazing decks where it can fully adapt. We have the entire range of the steel removal if the meta gets a bit fast. And if the meta gets a bit slower and a bit more top end heavy, we also have just the ability to rush through things with aerial and dime and try and close out games earlier before it gets to those late game stages. And I feel No Wheel does that the most successfully. All being said, I'm just going to make a last comment sort of on Wheel being a strong pick as well. Wheel is still really good. Core Blue Steel just is never going to be bad. If you want to play it, I don't see there's any negatives to that. I think it's an awesome deck. You can have so many games where you are maybe outmatched, outfavored, outskilled, whatever it is, the scenario is, but because you're using the wheel and you're resetting hands so often, you play that gamble of you're going to have a better 7 cards than they are, or you can just go over them so quickly knowing that you're going to keep resetting your hand and you don't really have to play too much value of the hand. You just dump it, wheel it, move on, and just go over them so quickly as you can do with wheel decks, the same way Steel Song does with its flooding. You could easily play it, and I think it would still perform amazingly well. I still think we're going to see Wheel around a lot. So definitely, yeah, it's still a strong deck. But I do think playing No Wheel it has much more room for finding the advantage to win. I think there's loads of matchups where it's just going to help the mirror. It's going to help not providing Ruby Sapphire with card draw as much because they're not going to get a fresh 7 from the wheel. So you're going to get them games back where players brick, and as well into Ruby Amethyst, they don't tend to brick, but if they miss the rabbit and their one drop cantrips haven't been that fateful, you get those wins back as well. Of course, on the flip side, we can brick, but with Chicha and Hiram, we just hope not to, and you just hope to perform quite well. But yeah, it is entirely down to skilling. You can't really just hand dump into the inkwell and then wheel and find a whole fresh new 7. You have to really think about your lines, think about your win con. But it's fairly simple, and I'm going to probably cover a lot more no wheel stuff than I will wheel stuff going forward, matchup guides, etc. But yeah, it is very much your main line is Porp into your 2-drop, and that will either be Cheater into red decks, which is really powerful, or just a Smee or Broom into other decks, dependent on it. Broom is very good into Diablo decks, and Smee has just always been a good 2-quester, and he can trade quite nicely, and he won't really get instantly removed that easily. But yeah, Chicha as well is overperforming against the red. She's awesome. Then you pretty much always want the Quill. Mickey is just your backup, and then as we go into set 6, it looks like Sail will be your backup instead of Mickey. And then with the extra ink from Quill, there you want to either be putting a Fire the Cannons down on like a whatever Diablo or a Flynn or just anything to slow your opponent down a little bit and take out a character, or a Fortisphere or whatever. But it's not ultimately important. You won't lose the game if you don't use that extra ink, but that extra ink is quite vital to be able to use Quill, get some value out of it, and then do something else as well is awesome. And then the following turn is Tinkerbell into aggressive decks, or Hiram, and then use that 2 ink to use Visions, another 2-drop, whatever you like. It's just awesome. It's such a good line. You're getting pretty much max value out of each turn. You're out-tempoing your opponent with how much value you're getting each turn. And then into the later parts, if you need to Tamatoa and close the game out and have an early Toa against Ruby Amethyst, and even into Ruby Sapphire, it's a Toa race, and if you get your Toa down first, you're forcing them to react to yours rather than vice versa. And then into the sort of earlier aggro decks, you've got Simba, you've got Hades, you can throw the Tinkerbells down at that stage as well and use that 2 ink for something else. And then Ariel can just close the game out whenever you like. So overall, when you actually get to playing it, besides the inking and sort of the lines, you have to the lines. The game plan is very simple. And when I say the lines are a little bit, they're not really that complicated. They are just what you need to ink. This list is playing with 18 uninkables as well. That could be quite scary, and sadly you will have some games probably where it does brick. But those will be minimal, and really if you're mulliganing properly and everything like that, it should be fine. Especially as well if you're using the Porps and the Fortispheres and the Visions to keep the engine going. The uninks shouldn't really worry you too much. A Visions on 2 isn't always the worst in the world. But yeah, there's a completely different play style, I think, to no wheel to wheel. But I think overall you'll just perform better. And wheeling on the draw has felt so weak into these later sets. Being behind even with ramp and then wheeling them to set them up is just it's not working for me as much as it used to be. So this just feels like it has a stronger game on the draw, and even with the wheel decks, you have a lot of games where it's just not valid to be wheeling. Um, I mean, even Ruby Amethyst on the draws felt quite weak on the wheel. The best time I failed to use the wheel is on the play versus Ruby Amethyst. Besides that, every other matchup it just feels not as strong to be using the wheel anymore. So it really is looking like the choice for me, and I think at this point I just need to get the reps in, just sort of lock into it. So I'm probably going to keep committing to it. I'll probably start streaming it as well a little bit and maybe getting some videos up on it. But yeah, going into set 6, it will be an updated list of this, and for set 5, like I say, I've got an event in Italy that I'll post about as well, and I'll keep talking about because I think it's going to be awesome. It will all be hopefully keeping with this list. I am a player who tends to flip-flop and stuff on their lists just due to confidence or whatever. As even with Seattle, I brought RP hoping to play that at one point. But I still think I've got good faith in this, and as this event in Italy is, it's not a DLC, but it's still one I really want to win. I think this is a good experience to bring the wheel version out, the non-wheel, sorry, not the wheel version out, and walk through it. But yeah, totally, I think this is the better option of the two. I still think Wheel has loads of valid, important things. Whole New World is still a really powerful card. It's a card that people say should get banned quite a lot. But yeah, as I really stand by this list as being the better of the two, and I'm gonna probably do some more content on it.